Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Patrick was the kind of man who believed in the power of stability. He always saw love as something you build little by little, brick by brick, with patience and dedication. That was exactly what he thought he'd found in Chloe. They met at a tech conference in Denver, a place full of people talking about innovation, algorithms, and future trends. Patrick was there because of work. He was a software engineer at a mid-sized company, and attending the event was part of his job. He wasn't the kind of person who stood out. He preferred to stay behind the scenes, observing the world around him while solving complex problems in the quiet of his computer. During a coffee break, he noticed Chloe for the first time. She was laughing in a lively group, and her charismatic, confident manner immediately caught his attention. She had a certain energy that naturally drew people in. When she realized he was looking at her, she smiled, a smile that seemed to say, "I know you're watching me, and that's okay." Patrick felt his face heat up, but he gathered the courage to walk over. They started talking, and he soon learned she worked as a graphic designer, a job that blended creativity and technology. The connection between them was immediate. Over the following months, their relationship blossomed. Chloe introduced Patrick to a world he had never explored before. She loved art, live music, and discovering new places. Under her influence, he started going out more and trying new things. They bought a modern apartment in Chicago together, adopted Max, a lively Labrador who filled their days with barks and fun, and even started dreaming big. They wanted to launch a startup, combining Patrick's tech skills with Chloe's design talent. From an outside perspective, they seemed like the perfect couple. Friends and family admired how well they complemented each other. But there were things Patrick preferred to ignore. Small details that, on their own, seemed harmless, but together cast a faint shadow over their relationship. Chloe was evasive whenever her past came up. Patrick knew she'd had other relationships, inevitable given their ages and life experience, but whenever he tried to talk about them, especially about Lucas, an ex mentioned briefly once, Chloe would quickly change the subject. She said Lucas was just part of a distant phase, someone who didn't matter anymore. Patrick wanted to believe her. He convinced himself these little details were simply part of a relationship still under construction, nothing that could shake what they had. Even so, he felt something wasn't right, a strange sense of unease he couldn't explain. Sometimes Chloe seemed distant, as though she was lost in thoughts she didn't share. He noticed this mostly at night, when they'd be on the couch watching movies or shows. She'd grab her phone and type messages quickly, tucking it away as soon as he got close. Patrick asked about it a few times, but Chloe always responded with simple excuses, just work, a friend who needs advice, nothing important. He accepted her explanations, trying to push away the nagging doubts that wouldn't quite leave him. Chloe suggested a romantic trip to Portugal. She said it would be a way to escape their routine, recharge, and strengthen their bond. Patrick was excited by the idea. They'd finally have time to themselves, far from work pressures and daily responsibilities. He started mentally planning all the places they'd visit and experiences they'd share. Maybe this was exactly what they needed, a break to reconnect. Little did he know, he was about to embark on a journey that would change everything he thought he knew about Chloe and himself. Their trip to Portugal began the way any pair of lovebirds would dream. The plane landed in Lisbon under a bright sky, and Patrick felt a surge of excitement as they picked up their bags and headed to the hotel. Chloe was especially enthusiastic, planning every detail of their itinerary. She wanted to show him all the places she loved most, the narrow streets of the Bairro Alto, the stunning viewpoints over the city, and the hidden restaurants serving traditional Portuguese dishes. In the first few days, everything seemed perfect. They strolled together over the cobblestone slopes, tasted fresh from the oven pastéis de nata, and watched the Tagus River shine at sunset. There was laughter, cell phone photos, and conversations about the future. But as the days went by, something changed. At first, it was just a faint feeling, barely noticeable. Chloe started acting differently. It was like a shadow had fallen over her, something Patrick couldn't put his finger on. She began disappearing for short periods without giving clear explanations. At breakfast in the hotel, she'd say she was going to buy souvenirs or check out a nearby store, but she'd be gone longer than she should have been. When asked, she gave vague answers like, "I lost track of time," or "I got distracted window shopping." Patrick tried not to dwell on it, thinking maybe it was just tiredness or the stress of being away from home. What really got his attention was her phone. Chloe had always checked messages here and there, but on this trip it seemed more frequent. At unexpected moments, she'd stop what they were doing to tap something out on her screen. One time, while they were touring Castelo de São Jorge, Patrick noticed she got a notification. Before he could see the name on the screen, she locked it and slipped it into her pocket. He felt a twinge of discomfort but told himself he was just being paranoid. After all, they were there to enjoy their trip, right? Then one particularly hot day, Patrick decided to investigate. Chloe had said she'd spend the afternoon at a spa near the hotel to relax after all the walking around. He offered to join her, but she insisted she needed some alone time. Something about how she said it, too soft, almost rehearsed, bothered him. He went to the spa she'd mentioned, only to be told by the receptionist that no one named Chloe had made any reservations for that time. Patrick felt a knot in his stomach. If she wasn't at the spa, where was she? He wandered the nearby streets, trying to figure out what might be happening. That's when he saw her. Chloe was sitting in a charming cafe, but she wasn't alone. Sitting across from her, leaning in as though they were sharing a secret, was Lucas, yes, the same one he recognized from photos, the ex-boyfriend she insisted was just part of the distant past. Patrick felt the ground disappear beneath him. He watched from a distance, unable to move. They were chatting and laughing like old friends, maybe more. Chloe looked completely at ease, as though this was routine. Every detail of that scene pounded in Patrick's mind. He realized the trip had nothing to do with strengthening their relationship. It all made sense now, the disappearances, the secret messages, her evasiveness about the past. Chloe had planned everything carefully, and he'd been naive enough to believe her promises. He felt anger, frustration, and above all, sadness because he'd placed so much trust in someone who apparently had never been on his side at all. Without making a scene, Patrick decided to act immediately. He knew he had to get out before it was too late. Heart pounding and mind racing, he returned to the hotel, packed his things, and got a flight back to Chicago at the earliest opportunity. He didn't confront Chloe or try to discuss what he'd seen. He chose to remain calm, waiting for the right moment to face the truth. As he waited for his taxi to the airport, he glanced out the window and thought of all the times he'd ignored the signs. Now, finally, he saw the truth. At the airport, while waiting to board, Patrick's phone vibrated for the first time. It was Chloe, texting, "Where are you? I got back to the room and you weren't there. What's going on?" He hesitated, phone in hand. He knew he had to say something, but didn't want to reveal his plans yet. He typed calmly, "Something urgent came up. I had to go home. We'll talk when you get back." Chloe's answer came almost immediately. "What do you mean, go home? You just left? Are you serious?" She sounded confused, maybe a bit annoyed, but Patrick could sense something else in her tone. There was a hint of worry and uncertainty, as if she was trying to figure out how much he knew. He replied again, keeping his composure, "I'm serious. Don't worry about it. We'll settle this when you get back." She called him right after, and he picked up, knowing ignoring her would make things worse. "Patrick, what's going on? Why'd you leave like that without telling me?" Her voice was soft, almost sweet, but he recognized that tone. It was the same one she used when trying to manipulate a situation. "Like I said, something urgent came up. I couldn't wait," he answered, staying calm. "We'll talk when you're back." Before she could press further, he ended the call and turned off his phone. He didn't want any more interruptions. The flight back to Chicago was one of the quietest times in Patrick's life. He stared out the window without really seeing anything, his mind reeling from everything he'd discovered. Memories of their relationship played like a movie in his head, but now they came with a new layer of meaning. Her absences, the secret messages, her evasiveness about Lucas, it was all part of a carefully laid plan. Patrick knew he had to act fast before Chloe returned and tried to twist the situation in her favor. As soon as he got to the apartment, he began to tackle practical matters. First, he called a locksmith and, in a concise way, explained that he needed to change the locks so Chloe would no longer have access. The locksmith arrived within an hour, and Patrick sat on the couch, watching every move. He knew it was just the first step of a bigger process, but he already felt a bit more in control of his life. He decided to gather proof of Chloe's infidelity. He knew he'd need it if she tried to spin the facts or tell lies. He grabbed the laptop she'd left at home, a careless or maybe arrogant oversight on her part. Opening her chat apps, he found explicit conversations between her and Lucas. They talked about the trip to Portugal as a chance to reconnect, planning every detail to fool Patrick. He also found records of recent financial transfers, some of them involving large sums to unknown accounts. There was no doubt Chloe had been preparing for something big. With that evidence, Patrick took the next step, protecting his finances. He logged into the joint accounts they shared and transferred half the balance to his personal account. It was partly symbolic and partly practical. He knew Chloe might try to drain their funds as soon as she got back, and he had to ensure she wouldn't take everything. He carefully documented each transaction, noting that he was dividing the funds fairly. He wanted proof later that he hadn't been dishonest. That same day, Patrick started packing Chloe's belongings. It was a meticulous process, almost cathartic. He separated her clothes, shoes, books, and personal items, putting everything in cardboard boxes he bought at a nearby store. While he packed, he noticed how much space her stuff took up, physically and emotionally. There were traces of her everywhere, framed photos, decorative pieces, even little notes she had tucked away in drawers. Each thing carried a memory, but those memories were now bitter. Patrick didn't hesitate to throw out anything he found unnecessary, like old birthday cards and gifts she'd given him. He wanted to get rid of any trace of her in that place. When he was done, he moved the boxes to the hallway and stacked them by the front door. He knew Chloe would return expecting everything to be as she left it, but she'd walk into a very different reality. At the end of the day, Patrick sank into the couch and took a deep breath. He'd done everything he could to protect himself and make sure Chloe had no place left in his life. There were no screams, no confrontations, no dramatic showdowns. He chose to handle everything calmly and strategically, reflecting his reserved and methodical nature. He knew challenges lay ahead, but right then, he felt relief. He'd finally taken control of his life, and no one could take that away from him. Chloe came back to Chicago a few days later, and her arrival was exactly how Patrick had pictured it, full of surprises and the reactions he was expecting. She found her boxes stacked outside the apartment before she even tried to open the door. A note taped to the entrance said, "Our relationship is over. Please don't contact me." She stood there frozen, suitcase in hand, rereading the note as though trying to grasp what those few words meant. Her face went from shock to disbelief, then changed again as she realized Patrick must have found something out, maybe everything. At first, she tried to work around it. She called him numerous times, but Patrick ignored the calls. Then she started sending messages full of feigned concern and calculated desperation. "Patrick, what's going on? Why did you do this?" One message after another, all with the same tone. She was hurt, confused, and wanted an explanation. But Patrick knew it was just part of her game. Over the past few weeks, he'd learned Chloe was an expert at manipulating situations to appear like the victim, and he wasn't falling for it anymore. Realizing Patrick wouldn't respond, Chloe switched tactics. She began spreading stories to mutual friends that painted a totally different picture. She said Patrick had lost his mind, that he was controlling and possessive, and had kicked her out for no reason. She claimed he was obsessed with financial control and had stolen her money, even hinting that he had severe emotional problems. The accusations were ridiculous, but Chloe knew how to tell stories that sounded plausible, especially to those who didn't know the full details of their private life. But Patrick had foreseen this. Even before Chloe made a move, he shared some of the evidence he'd gathered with close friends. He showed screenshots of her conversations with Lucas, records of suspicious money transfers, even prints of messages she'd sent during their trip to Portugal. He didn't need to say much, the evidence spoke for itself. Their mutual friends started to see the truth. Some stayed silent, while others confronted Chloe directly, demanding explanations. Gradually, the web of lies she'd woven began to collapse. Chloe noticed she was rapidly losing ground. She tried to repair her image, but more and more people were stepping away from her. Even her closest friends, the ones who really mattered, began to question how she'd behaved over the years. Some recalled occasions when she'd been evasive or told little lies. Others realized how she always seemed to manipulate her surroundings to get what she wanted. Chloe found herself isolated, unable to escape the consequences of her own actions. Still, she didn't give up. She tried attacking Patrick in other ways, spreading more lies and rumors. She even hinted he was involved in illegal activities, something she knew was absurd but might cause him problems if anyone believed it. Patrick, however, was prepared. He hired a civil attorney and issued a cease and desist letter, warning Chloe to stop defaming him or trying to harm his reputation. The letter was clear and direct, making it obvious that any new false claims would be met with legal action. Chloe got the letter and realized she no longer had any space to continue her game. With no options left and feeling more isolated by the day, Chloe ended up moving in with her mother, a choice that seemed like her only escape after losing the apartment and control over the life she'd created. Living there wasn't easy. Her mother was tired of her impulsive and irresponsible decisions and constantly reminded her that the situation she was in was a direct result of her own actions. Chloe tried to maintain her composure, but it was clear she was shaken, stuck in a cramped environment that only amplified her discomfort. Little by little, she realized her life had taken a turn she never expected, and she would have to face the consequences of everything she'd done. Months passed after Patrick decided to move forward, and he was a changed man. The difference wasn't just in how he dressed or the confidence in his posture, something much deeper had happened inside him. He found a new sense of purpose by getting involved in social projects helping at-risk youth, something he'd always thought about but never pursued because of his corporate career. Only after breaking up with Chloe did he feel brave enough to take that step. Helping these young people gave him a fulfillment he'd never experienced before. Every story he heard, every genuine smile from someone receiving support, fueled his desire to keep going. That's how he met Emily. She was a dedicated volunteer, always ready to help without expecting anything in return. Her kindness and sincerity were apparent to anyone who spent time with her. Unlike Chloe, Emily had no hidden motives, nor did she try to control situations. She simply was who she was, someone who believed in the good in people and worked tirelessly to make a difference. Patrick felt an immediate connection, but this time it was different. He wasn't looking to fill a void. He was ready to share his life with someone who held the same values he did. Emily helped him rediscover self-love, something that had been shaken by years of an unhealthy relationship. They talked about their passions and dreams, realizing they had a lot in common. Together, they decided to create something bigger, a digital platform connecting people who wanted to make a social impact with organizations that needed support. The idea came up in a casual conversation at a charity event. They noticed many people wanted to help but didn't know where to start. Their platform would be a bridge between those willing to lend a hand and the groups looking for help. Patrick brought his tech expertise to build the system, while Emily used her experience with volunteer networks to map out community needs. Working side by side on this project brought them even closer. It wasn't just work, it was a partnership based on respect, admiration, and shared values. For the first time in years, Patrick felt he was doing something that truly mattered, something beyond his own interests. Meanwhile, Chloe remained stuck with the fallout of her poor choices. Living with her mother wasn't a real fix, and constant criticism only grew her frustration. She tried to rebuild her life, but nothing worked. The lies she had spread about Patrick came back to haunt her once people learned the truth. With no close friends to rely on and no clear path for personal or professional growth, Chloe found herself alone. The consequences of her actions finally caught up with her, yet she still refused to acknowledge her mistakes. Every time she tried to blame others for her situation, she drifted further from finding a real way out. The isolation she'd created became her prison, and there was no one to blame but herself. The fate of both made it clear that our choices shape our lives in ways we can't always predict. For Patrick, the end of a toxic relationship marked the start of a new phase filled with possibilities. He learned the best way to handle betrayal is to turn it into motivation to start over and build something meaningful. Chloe, on the other hand, found herself consumed by the consequences of her own actions, unable to see her faults or take an honest approach to changing her path. The life lesson their stories left behind is obvious: truth always comes out in the end, and the greatest gift we can give ourselves is to walk away from a toxic situation and move on. Instead of clinging to resentments or letting the past decide our future, we can turn hardships into fuel for something new and positive. That's exactly what Patrick did, and his journey was a powerful reminder that no matter how hard the beginning may be, starting over can be the key to a genuine, fulfilling life. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.